there! How are you all doing today? I've just been taking a stroll through our Blue Cavern exhibit. My name is Jen, and I'm with the Aquarium of the Pacific here for our beautiful online academy. So good morning to those that are watching live. Our goal today is to talk a little bit about wetlands. Joining me today in the studio, of course, is Stacy, who's doing all the lovely magic back here. And then we also have Carrie today. Filtering through and sending us your questions and bringing them into the studio. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Yeah? If you happen to have any questions throughout this time, though, feel free to go on ahead and text us right down here, 562-286-1838. Would love to definitely hear from you. If you happen to have any thoughts that kind of come to mind in regards to wetlands, or if there's a question that you're like itching to ask. And with that, of course, texting rates do apply, so please make sure you keep that in mind. And if you are a younger one, please make sure that you get parents' or adults' permission. All right, so let's go on ahead and get started. Wetlands. What do you think of when you hear the word wetlands? Well, kind of think of, sounds like things are wet, maybe land. If you thought about that, you're correct. I know. Makes it nice and easy, doesn't it? If only scientists always had a way to be able to put that definition directly into the word. So what we have here is a lovely picture of a wetland. And so with that, you can definitely see some more wet pieces and then also some more dry pieces right there. But you know, this is just like kind of like a bird's eye view, if you will, a top view of these wetlands. So if this helps you kind of think about, maybe you've ever been to a place like this, maybe an estuary, a marsh, or a swamp, all those sorts of things are considered wetlands, right? And so maybe it's fresh water, maybe it's, you know, kind of that brackish water where it's somewhere in between, right? But regardless of whether it's a estuary, swamp, marsh, fresh water, or maybe kind of a fresh salty mix, these are habitats that are absolutely fantastic, where we have so many different animals that live in there. So how do you think all of these animals are able to be supported in such an environment? Any thoughts on why this habitat is so important? Well, if I think about the word wetland, seems like there's probably some tasty treats in the water, right? But then there's probably some tasty treats on land too. So this area, this wetland that we have, is an incredible source for food for many animals. Now today we're going to be talking a little bit more about how these places are very important to several different animals. But if we just think about this habitat as is, without the animals, I see that it's probably in some coastal areas, right? Meaning that it's right where the land and maybe like the ocean kind of get a chance to meet, which is perfect for those fresh salt water, brackish mixing areas right there. But if we think about what I like to call kind of like the ecosystem services, what this habitat provides to all animals, including us here on land, is that these areas are really great for if there's any kind of storms, right? So if there's a storm, you can imagine stormy seas, waves are crashing everywhere on the coastland. Not really, but you know, the waves are crashing. It's actually one of my favorite times to be near the water, or sometimes even not the water. I think it's really beautiful. But these wetlands areas are really good areas that kind of help protect a lot of the coastland. So whenever there happens to be a storm, many times that energy from the waves get put directly into these wetlands area. They act as buffers, so that way those extra stormy seas or those extra waves don't come up on land as much, where maybe our homes might be. And so these are great buffer areas. Now, not only is it great for that sense, but it also is a great filtration system. You're like, how does it filter? It's like you're in water. But believe it or not, if we think about us on land, right, and at least here in Southern California, it really doesn't rain all that often. And so because it doesn't rain all that often, a lot of pollution tends to get stored on our lands. That pollution may look like, well, what do you think? If you think about different types of pollution that's in your your neighborhood, what do you see if you're maybe, looking out on your neighborhood street? Hmm. Well, for me in my neighborhood, I might see oil that's, kind of into the concrete there. I might go on ahead and see, maybe like a chip bag or a wrapper that's on the ground. I might see fertilizer that's used to make everything really beautifully green, right? Well, when all of that stuff just generally accumulates and is on the land, and then it finally rains here, at least in Southern California, all of that water runs over that land and it pushes all of that pollution down into our storm drains and eventually into the ocean. So, what's really incredible is that these habitats kind of live, like I mentioned, on that ocean freshwater border, right? And so much of that pollution ends up either going directly into our oceans or maybe through our wetlands here. Now, what's incredible, at least the trash part, it's harder to get rid of. We should probably do our part to be able to pick up our trash. But things, all of the different chemicals, like maybe extra dirt or the oil or fertilizers, all of that actually get soaked up and filtered out through these wetlands. And so they create basically a big filter that filters out cleaner water back into these estuaries right here. Now, those are just a few things that are nice, for us as humans. But of course, there are so many, a plethora of animals, if you will, a whole bunch of animals that really thrive in this incredible ecosystem. And I'm excited to share with you some of them today. Now, if we think about animals that might live there in these wetlands, well, I think of maybe like some fish. Definitely maybe some like snails and other invertebrates. Maybe worms, clams. What do you notice? Do you see birds? I see them too. Let's go ahead and let's take a look and watch and see maybe what kind of animals aside from birds that you notice. I'm going to step out of the frame for a little bit. Looks kind of muddy, isn't it? Yeah. Here I thought that was water, but it looks like they're just walking directly on top of it. Yeah, that's right. It's mud, right? So not only is it, so a lot of these places, like I mentioned, are kind of on the border of the ocean and a lot of rivers. And so some of these places, depending upon where you are, also have to deal with a lot of tide changes. Now, here in Southern California, we have 2 high tides and 2 low tides a day. And a lot of times that may influence some of the areas, some of the wetlands that we have. And so this leads to some very nice kind of, muddy areas. Also, depending upon the rain, right? If there's a lot or a little rain, that also might help change the amount of water that you might find in these estuaries. So if we think about muddy critters, definitely think of a lot of worms, right? And let's see. Maybe some other kind of crabs, maybe some other crunchy, delicious foods, right? That live really kind of in that sand. So clams, a lot of those kinds of foods. Now, if we think about predators, yeah, here we have a wide variety of predators. We have some of these smaller birds right here. What do you think they might be trying to eat? Well, we can kind of see a little bit of their beaks. They look kind of long, right? So does this one. So does our heron here. That's a really long beak. Let's see if we can explore maybe some of them a little further, right? So from here, we can already tell that maybe some beak sizes might help us figure out what they eat. But if we go ahead and let's start maybe with a duck, and we can maybe get a chance to see a little bit better. Here's our ruddy duck right here. Isn't it beautiful? And so maybe we can get a chance to see, as we look and zoom into this bird right here, how it's able to be able to live in such a wetland habitat. Now, much like many ducks, right, we kind of think about it, and you can see a little bit right here, they have very kind of like fleshy, paddly feet, right? So they have those feet right there that they use to move along and to paddle along, all along the very top of the water. You can see our ruddy duck is very buoyant, right? Sits up on top, just kind of floats, and it uses its feet to kind of paddle along as it goes. Now, So we have a pretty good idea that this duck right here is really good at just kind of standing at the surface and paddling along. And so we know that it probably feeds a little bit towards the top or the surface of the water. Now, if you've ever had a chance to look at ducks in your neighborhood, do they always stay up at the top of the water, or do they ever dive down? I think I've seen some dive down every once in a while. You'll see their top half go into the water and their back half just kind of pop up and they just kind of bounce along. It's one of my favorite ways to be able to watch a duck in its natural lake or estuary habitat that we have here. And so with these ducks, right, a lot of times they will use that beak of theirs to really be able to eat either some plant material that might be up at the top, or maybe some plants or different invertebrates, right? Different kinds of little animals. Maybe they're snails. Maybe they are, worms. Maybe they are little crabs, right? Whatever it happens to be, these animals are great at kind of digging a little bit through that mud or eating whatever is right at the very top of that mud surface. And they can also skim across too and eat a lot of different, maybe like freshwater insects too. So anything that you might see that might live on the very top, so different, like mayfly larvae or nymphs or anything along those lines too, they can just snatch them since they're right at the surface of the water. So really kind of cool that it's able to use a lot of the water, right? Either at the very top to be able to munch along, or to kind of bob and dive a little bit to be able to get maybe something that's a little bit below the surface or into the mud. So very cool animal right here. Now, but if we think about our wetlands, right? I didn't always see these ducks. I saw a lot of birds with longer legs and longer beaks. So I'll leave it to Stacy to show us our next bird that we're going to be talking about here. But what's really cool about these wetland areas is it lends itself to a wide diversity of birds. Now, I'm just talking about birds right now, but there's so many other cool animals that live in the area. I know Stacy and I, or Stacy and Alicia, another member, and I were all kind of talking about different kinds of animals that live in there. And so, there's a lot of land critters too. Some of them, which might be predators to birds like our snowy egret right here. But you'll find a lot of land animals like foxes and raccoons, and a lot of rodents as well, just to name a small handful of them, that live alongside of some of these birds that we're highlighting today. So here we have our snowy egret. Now it's really tricky to see in this picture, but our snowy egret has bright yellow feet at the very bottom. So our ruddy duck had those big kind of, webbed feet that it used to kind of paddle along in the back as it moved along to graze at the surface and a little bit below. What about the snowy egret? How do you think this one likes to eat? Well, long legs. That's a nice clue. So where do you think it likes to feed? I don't know if you remember our video earlier, but we saw some smaller birds and larger birds that were wading through that mud, right? And so these long legs are great for either wading through the mud, or even better yet, through the water, maybe through that tall grass that we saw earlier, right? And so, oh, look at that, directly in action. Whoop. I think I scared them away. Right? But as you can see here, these birds that we have also have those very long legs that really help them to trudge through a lot of that water. Also had those long beaks. So we had a thought. We now know what those long legs are for. Oh, I forgot to mention, these egrets have yellow feet. Why do you think they might have black legs and yellow feet? Maybe they like to wear colorful shoes, if they had shoes. But those yellow toes are really great at kind of getting underneath the mud, and they wiggle them around, and that yellow kind of attracts some of the different animals that might be living in the water. They're like, wait, what? What's that yellow? Let me go check it out. And then they get eaten by our egret right here, right? So it has that pointy beak that we could see, and that beak helps them to be able to snatch their food directly out of the water. Now, these legs are also good for allowing it to kind of see over, right? And being able to see at a distance to then be able to eat it. So these are pretty amazing. All right, so we have a few questions. Thank you all for joining us. Gage, oh wow, so you are driving to Arizona. Or I guess you're within Arizona, so you're driving around. So it's great to have you joining us while we're in your vehicle today. And your question was, how do ducks migrate? And that's an awesome question because many of them do. Now, some, if they have it good, will stay there year round. But there are a lot of birds that do tend to migrate, including some ducks. Now, these wetland areas are fantastic habitats for that. If you think about maybe on a road trip, much like how you are, Gage, but also for others that may have also gone on road trips too, right? You drive for a while, and you're like, man, sure would like a snack. And you eat your snack, you drink your water, or maybe your coffee if it's an early morning, right? And then you're like, oh no, I need to go to the bathroom and I need more snacks, right? And so you go on ahead, you have your pit stops and you go and maybe you rest for a while because you've been traveling for a long time. Maybe you are there to kind of just, maybe take a little nap, get some food, relax, and then head on your way. Well, same thing for many of these birds, migratory birds. They will use these areas, these wetlands, these swamps, marshes, estuaries to be able to kind of take that rest. But also they're great areas to be able to breed into, right? Because there's so much food and so much amazing habitat that's nearby for them to maybe build their nest and for them to raise or start a family there too. And so hopefully that helps answer a little bit of your question, Gage. But they'll go on ahead and they'll fly, right? So these birds, even though they spend a lot of their time in water, they will use their wings to be able to fly from one area to another. Now, what's really cool is there are some great migratory bird surveys that are done. And I think it's by Cornell Lab that does them. And it's like basically you watch for birds during this one time of the year, and you're able to take that survey. You're able to see what birds you see in your area, you put it into the database, and then scientists are able to track those birds' migratory patterns over the course of a season. So it's really incredible the different ways that you actually as a person can get engaged to help understand the migratory birds and to get to know what birds do pass by your local area. All right. And then Bella is asking, why the blue beak? That is a great question. So here right now, I don't think, Stacey, is that right, that females don't have the blue beak yet? It's only the males. So, why do you think it might have the blue beak if it's only the males? Ah, yes, to look extra attractive. You are correct, right? So that blue beak really is like, hi, I'm a really healthy male. I can go on ahead and fend for myself, and I have enough energy to create this lovely blue color. Won't you be my date? Right? And so that's one way in which these ducks are able to really kind of advertise how amazing that particular adult is. Jove is asking, do ducks have long legs? It is kind of tricky to be able to see in this one, and I don't know if we happen to have another one. I don't know why, but my mind goes towards like DuckTales or Scrooge McDuck. But if we think about a lot of ducks in general, I know those are cartoons and they're not exactly accurate, right? But if we think about those ducks, maybe I'm wanting to relax with the cartoons right now, but regardless, right? Many of them have small feet. And so they have small squat feet that they use to kind of walk around like that. I invite you next time, maybe if you're near a local pond or a lake. Here we go. Thanks, Stacy. We have some buffleheads right here, and you can see how they have short legs, right? So they're kind of cute because they have that large kind of body right there with all the fluffy feathers, and you have the legs that are kind of like out to the side. So you can imagine them walking like this, right? As they kind of move around. And so they're pretty cute right here. And also, maybe if you happen to have some ducks in your local pond, or maybe even some like geese, you can go on ahead and check out how they walk. Though geese, I think the legs are a little bit longer, but these ducks, hopefully you can maybe find somewhere in your local neighborhood. All right, thanks for asking. Oh, more questions. How do some birds know when it's time to migrate? That is a really, really interesting question, right? I think there might be several factors that help them to migrate. Some of them maybe just internally, that they're like, yes, I know it's time. Other times it might be the changing of seasons, right? The amount of food that's available, temperature changes. Because these areas are not just coastal regions, even though we've been focusing a lot on the coastal regions, there are inland kind of wetland areas too. And so it's really kind of depending upon the different factors that are within that particular area. So maybe temperature, food availability, the amount of water that may be in there for their prey to be able to survive. Those are just some of the factors that might help determine whether they migrate. Am I missing any others? Ah, thank you. Yeah. So Stacey also reminded me about sun, right? So for sure, the amount of sunlight per day is another really good indicator as well. I use that for my vegetables at home too. All right. So thank you all for asking these great questions. And so right now we're just mainly focusing on some of these birds. And here's a really another cool one. This is a great blue heron that we have here. And this is another kind of long-legged bird that you can't see actually how long its legs are, but they're even longer than the egret. And so here we have its legs that probably starts from about here and goes all the way down. And it has a really long beak too. So what do you think? A bird with even longer legs and even a longer beak. Thoughts to what it might eat or how it might catch its food? Well, I don't see additional color on its feet like the snowy egret with that yellow that it had earlier. But if it has longer legs and even a longer beak, maybe it stabs its food. Maybe it's able to walk much further, right? Be able to wade around and see, are there any delicious fish on land? Are there any maybe tasty rats or any kind of rodents or tasty fish on water? That'd be weird, right? If a fish with little legs walking around, but maybe not so much the case. We do have so we do have some fish that do come on land, though, mud skippers, but they're found in more tropical areas with mangroves. But an animal that does kind of live in between that water and that muddy area. So maybe in tropical areas, tropical wetlands, we might have those mud skippers. But for here in Southern California, I can definitely say I have yet to see any fish with actual feet or legs on them. If you do, let us know. You can always text us our number to fill us in and maybe take a picture of it too. But with these fish, yeah, right here. So if you see it, please, please, please go on ahead and send us that picture. But if we do think about it, right, we have all these smaller rodents that are on. We have some of the smaller in the water. And so it's another great food source for this great blue heron right here. Depending upon, maybe how many other predators might be around either on the waterfront itself or maybe on land, right? It can advantageously take advantage of a wide variety of food sources. So that's pretty cool that this animal can do that right here. But if we think about it, right, we've been talking a lot about predators. But what are some other ways in which maybe some of the more aquatic animals are able to survive in such an environment? Because, clearly there's a lot of animals that want to eat them. Well, if we think about these wetland areas, right, there was a lot of grassy areas. Some areas are a little bit shallow, like we saw that muddy area, but other areas are a little bit deeper. And so this is a really great place where there's a large nursery. So can you think of maybe some baby animals that might want to spend their time there? Aside from baby birds? Yeah. Did I hear? Yes, baby fish. Absolutely. Right? And also stingrays. So this is a great area for stingrays to be able to live and to thrive. And here's a great picture right here of one of our bat rays. And so rays love the sandy kind of habitat. And this muddy area in wetlands are a great place for them. These animals love to eat delicious clams. It's a little hard to see their mouth, but it's located right underneath there. And so they're able to really kind of eat a lot of great crunchy things. Not only clams, but also maybe some crabs, right? Maybe some fish, anything that's kind of lurking maybe right at that surface level of the mud or a little bit underneath. These animals can sense them out to be able to eat them. And so it's a great nursery area for many of these creatures. Now, not only is there different water amounts or water levels, but there's a lot of great aquatic plants that live there too. As we talked about earlier, these aquatic plants are great at being able to filter out different kinds of pollutants here on land. But with these plants, they also provide really good shelter for maybe some baby blackneck stilts that we have here, though this one's an adult. But here, maybe it wants to have its chicks go on ahead and stay very much protected in some of this brush right here. Same thing for some of the baby fish, right? They're able to hide within many of the different kinds of grasses that are in there to help them to survive too. So these are just a few of the different kinds of ways in which many of these animals are able to survive in the wetlands. Oh my goodness, this is the best. So I'm going to get out of this picture altogether because you need to just see these cute babies. So these are baby black-necked stilts. Try to say that 3 times fast. Ah, they're so great. Aren't they cute? You can see those very long legs with that sharp, pointy beak. And you can see them hanging out in that brush right there. Just kind of feeling pretty comfortable at home, using that long beak to really dig into the mud, which is another great adaptation. And so, yeah, aren't they cute? Oh, and if you notice too, they had a really cool kind of camouflage to them right here. So if you notice, it kind of has like 2 tones, right? It has that kind of mottled color right up there, and then a brighter white underneath. So it definitely helps them to be able to blend in with this environment on top. Ooh, we have 2 more questions. Mia is asking, are there many types of ducks? Yes, there are! There's more than just the Ruddy Duck, Scrooge McDuck, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and Donald, and Daisy, right? There are many more. More real ducks, I guess, though maybe some might think that those are real. But yeah, there are tons of different varieties. I know one common duck that is fairly cosmopolitan, or that's found usually in a wide variety of places, are going to be your mallard ducks. So those are the ones that you'll see in your local pond, or, maybe around areas that may have some water nearby. And so they're, I think, one of the more quintessential or typical duck that you might see. But yes, there are tons of different ducks. There are even ocean-going ducks as well. They're called, one of my favorites is called surf scoters. And so there are tons of different ducks out there. And so thank you, Mia, for asking. If I had more minutes, I'd be able to go over some more varieties, but there definitely are. Bufflehead, as Stacy showed earlier, with a little bit of white along the blackness of its head. That was another duck that we happen to have here off of California. Oh, and Isaac is asking, what do ducks eat? Oh yeah, so let's go ahead and see if we can review that. Stacey, if you wouldn't mind putting up a duck of your choice, thank you. Right, so here we have our beautiful ruddy duck right here. And let's look at that bill. Looks pretty kind of rounded, right? And we talked a little bit earlier about how they kind of float at the top and they use those feet to be able to paddle back behind them. And they're very buoyant, right? They sit very much on top of that water. So what do you think it might eat? Well, if you were listening earlier, or maybe just tuning in now, what'd you think of? Yeah, maybe some insects that live at the very top of the water, right? Believe it or not, if you're ever near a creek or if you're near a pond, there are tons and tons of small, almost clear insects. Some of them are just small, not so clear, but you can see them and you can catch them and you can get an idea of how healthy a lake or a stream is. And so with these different bugs, right, they eat a lot of the algae off of the rocks, and these eat those bugs. And so it's pretty incredible that they're able to just kind of nip along the very top. But they not only eat maybe some of the bugs that's living off the top, they also eat plants too. So maybe they eat some of that algae that's up on the top, or they also might eat some aquatic plants that are rooted down in the mud. Now, not only the aquatic plants, but they also have the potential to eat a lot of invertebrates that live down there too. Invertebrates like maybe, animals without a backbone. That's what I'm talking about. So maybe some worms, maybe some clams, maybe some snails, maybe some small crabs, animals of that sort that love to live and hide in that mud, right? All right, so Isaac, hopefully that answered your question. And I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us. We are unfortunately all out of time, but we're very excited to have you back for our next class, which is Fishy fun! Could you tell I had to go towards the door to get that answer? And so join us to learn a little bit more about fish, because we covered birds. And if you're like, man, I'm hankering to know a little bit more about fish, you talked a little bit about juvenile fish, and you talked about, rays, cartilaginous fish, maybe you want to know more. So feel free to join us for Fishy Fun. Stacy's going to be teaching that one, so it's going to be a great time. So thank you once again for joining us today, and definitely looking forward to seeing you for our next program. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye.